That is, of course, Candyman. Not by Christina Aguilera, by Miriam Bradley here on the KCLR Daily. Now, MS Ireland's proud to announce their programme for World MS Day on May 30th. And joining us now to tell us about the theme of diagnosis is Miriam Gray, Regional Community Worker for Carlow and Kilkenny with MS Ireland. Miriam, great to have you with us.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning or afternoon.
Are we still just about in the morning, I think, a little bit of time left to go, but often I get confused at this time of day as well. Listen, a global event aims to raise awareness for MS and provide a platform for individuals affected by the condition. Tell us about what you would love to achieve from World MS Day this year.
Okay, so I suppose it's happening on May 30th, first of all. So every year we try and, I suppose, highlight MS and, like you said, raise awareness and provide a platform. And this year, I suppose, and for the next 3 years, diagnosis has been chosen. And we have over 10,000 people in Ireland affected by MS, and it's a complex neurological condition. And about, we'll say, 300 people will be diagnosed this year in Ireland with MS, 6 in every 100,000. And, in, I think, the southeast, we're talking about over 700 people that would link in with our service. So it's really important that we know here in Carlow and Kilkenny that we have people that have MS and that are being diagnosed with MS. And we're trying to just highlight that, provide a platform and let them know that there are organisations like MS Ireland that are available to them and what we provide. Do you want me to name some of the supports, Brian, or...?
We'll talk about the supports in a moment, but just on the theme of diagnosis, have MS Ireland chosen that theme because MS is a difficult condition to diagnose?
So actually, this is a theme that's for global awareness. So we don't choose it. All the other countries are running with this theme. So I suppose it's to diagnosis, as you can imagine, is quite a land for some people when they get it. It's not always straightforward. It's a complex condition, so it might take people many years to get that diagnosis. They may have been having symptoms that they didn't recognise were MS. But and when people receive that diagnosis, there are many elements involved. So they may have had a number of tests. They may have gone for a lumbar puncture. We'll say MRI. They'll be seen by a neurologist, and then it's the treatment plan for that, the management of it. So your diagnosis and your understanding of that can take quite a while, a number of years, and it's just to provide people with a maintenance plan, support plan, treatment plan, and let them know that diagnosis isn't just you've got MS. There are different types of MS, remitting, relapsing MS, primary progressive, and I suppose where that can take you and how you deal with that then as a person. And the landscape, Brian, of MS has changed. There are a number of disease-modifying therapies available to people. While we know there isn't a cure, the landscape in the last number of years has changed on how you manage it and how you treat the symptoms. Because you and I could have a diagnosis in the morning, but we may present very differently, and MS may affect us very differently. So, it's how you move forward with that and how you manage the condition, if that makes sense.
You mentioned there, yeah, absolutely. You mentioned there some of the numbers. I think you said 6 in every 1,000 people. That might be quite a surprise to listeners to hear.
100,000.
Thankfully,
sorry.
It's not what you'd necessarily call. Yeah, so it's not what you'd necessarily call a common condition, but maybe a lot more common than people might think it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's more common for women. So I suppose, when you think about it, and especially the diagnosis age is between 20 and 40 years of age, and a lot of things are happening for you during those age. You're starting maybe your career, your family, so it's a very active time in your life. And it's more prevalent in women, 3 to 1. So yeah, and I can only speak for, I cover Carlow, Kilkenny, obviously. So who link in with our services? We've about, I think, engaging the southeast, we've over 700 people that actively engage here with us. But that's not everybody, obviously, that has MS. That's who have chosen to link in with MS Ireland,
And we talked earlier on very briefly, or you mentioned, should I say, earlier on very briefly, supports and services, those wraparound services that are key to help people, I suppose, digest and understand the diagnosis and understand what help and support they may need living with the condition. For people that are living and listening this morning with MS, or maybe who are just recently diagnosed in the Carlow, Kilkenny area, give us a flavour of some of those supports that can make a real difference.
Yeah. So we are here in the regional office, as a community worker, we provide individual casework, that's one-to-one support for people if you want to get in touch with us. But we also have a range of physical activity programs, physio and yoga, and we also have specialist online exercise programs called Move Smart, and that's a national program where you actually get to meet or interact with people, from a peer level as well, which is great. So we do peer support programs, coffee mornings, meetings, information seminars and webinars, and then we run programs like fatigue management, because that's one of the top 3 symptoms that somebody may have if they have been diagnosed with MS. So I suppose it's around, firstly, if you feel comfortable about getting in touch, anywhere in the southeast or Carlow and Kilkenny, and then we can have a chat and look at who you need to be linked into, what services, be it the public health nurse, physio programs, back to your GP, onto your consultant. And it's just about finding a pathway and really how you manage. And the self-management plan is really important, remaining, active and healthy, and how you cope then with the condition. I suppose, Brian, is kind of how we approach it, really. And we do also have voluntary branches in Carlow and Kilkenny, which are really important, and they provide local support, and they do excellent fundraising. And we've had some epic tractor runs that have provided great funding, Ballyhale and Three Castles and vintage car runs. And they provide us then with the funding to run the coffee mornings, young people's meetings, and a family day that we're going to have there, hopefully coming up in Waterford in September. So they are really, really important. And if people want to get involved in those, they're also very welcome.
And Miriam, what about supports for those who are assisting, caring, if you like, for those who have MS? I mean, it must be a very difficult condition, and you mentioned fatigue for those who have MS. It must be quite fatiguing and tiring for those who are offering support. I know they do so, without question or favour or need for, gratitude in that regard as family members, but they also need support. What are supports like for carers?
So that's a really good question, Brian, and I suppose an honest answer is there isn't enough support for family carers. We do offer, information and support where we can, but I suppose we're limited in what we have to offer. Family Carers Ireland are, I suppose, there around information and what we can do in providing a listening ear and support. We try and do that, or information, but it's quite limited. But in terms of peer support, if we can offer that for family members, we do that. But it's mostly at our ends, kind of listening ear or, signposting to the family carers. That's what we kind of offer, our guidance,
When it then comes to actual, World MS Day happening on the 30th of May, I know you're encouraging people to write letters in relation to their past or future selves and family members and such, talking about their diagnosis experience. I mean, it's maybe quite a sort of therapeutic thing for people to do that want to do it. But what do you intend to use those letters for, and how can people who might want to write them get in contact with you?
Yeah, so that's great, and thanks for bringing that up. So the theme, as you've mentioned, is diagnosis, and so while it is very, you said, like a very emotive and very reflective piece, it's also very challenging, and we've had some really inspirational letters already into the office that people have shown us as an example of the work they've put into it. It reflects their journey and obviously their pathway through their diagnosis. And for some people that's been 40 years or it's been 10 years, and they've written them maybe to family members or, the politicians because it's that time of the year for elections, or they've written them to medical providers, or they've been trying to kind of strike a tone in it. And for some people, it's about how they've just had it, or maybe their experience, and maybe to their families about how they felt along their journey. But what they've done is, with them, we're inviting people living with MS to write their story, and then to raise awareness on the 30th, and to put that, I suppose, to post it on, we'll say maybe Facebook, Instagram, put it up on X, and then tag it, with To Multiple Sclerosis Ireland. And there's set times for that, 9:30, 1:30, and I think it's 5:30. And that's kind of what it's going to, it's to make I suppose, to share that campaign and to share that message, and to show people that these are real people affected by a neurological condition, and this is how their lives have been impacted by that condition, and how they have managed to, I suppose, navigate the course of MS in a way.
I suppose even for those who might not want to actually write their own letter, I mean, checking out the social media platforms and viewing the letters of other people who are on maybe a different phase or a different stage of their MS journey, it might be, in a way, something that gives those who are in the earlier stages a sense of hope, a sense that, other people are writing and talking about how they felt when they first got their diagnosis. So there's benefits even for people who don't necessarily want to write their own letter.
Absolutely, and I suppose it shows you how people have, I suppose, the resilience, and I'm always struck by the resilience of people, and how life is managed, and like we've seen letters, how careers have been managed, or children, families, so it absolutely strikes a chord with people, and you'd be surprised. We've had feedback already to say that it is emotive, but really, really important in terms of managing the self-management of their, I suppose, condition. It's hard to kind of put it into words till you start reading it, but also how they've navigated maybe the medical side of things, treatments, and how they've advocated for themselves, and the power in advocating for yourself and managing your own condition, and managing your own treatment and understanding your treatment going forward.
Miriam, do we know just how many people are living with MS here in Kilkenny and Carlow?
So that's a really good question. So we don't actually have a register, but I could tell you, because it's kind of calculated with the long-term illness numbers, but I can tell you who's linked in. We've about over 700 in the southeast linked in, because we do it for the whole southeast. So I think if you go on the numbers, about 250 maybe in Kilkenny, and on just about 100 in Carlow. That's very rough, that are linked in with our services, but obviously there's a lot more than that, because some people choose not to share their diagnosis and mightn't apply for the long-term illness card. So it's hard exactly, Brian, to get an estimate, and that's one of the things that keep coming up, that we do need a register, to go further for funding and everything else like that.
That'll be key, I suppose, to lobby government to be able to get that funding as well. So an important piece of information, should we be able to get it. Miriam, just ahead of World MS Day coming up now in just a couple of days' time on the 30th, for people who maybe are living with MS and haven't registered or connected with the services, or for just those who want to find out more, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you or other service providers here locally?
Yeah, so they can contact the office. We're here in Kilkenny on 13 Black Mill Street. You can call us on the office on 056 7777 71, or you can email us on southeast@ms-society.ie, and you'll get Olive here in the office, or myself. But also just to mention that we run coffee mornings, one-to-one service, but we're always just pick up the phone, and if you don't want to meet people, the peer-to-peer support is phenomenal here in Kilkenny and Carlow. But if you don't want to meet people right now, you might want to meet them in a few months' time or a few years' time. Just make the connection, and we'll be able to do the rest for you. You'd be surprised. And even just getting the right information at the right time, not having to Google it, we can get you that, so sometimes that's invaluable.
Yeah, well, Miriam Gray, the regional community worker for Carlow and Kilkenny with MS Ireland. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for dealing so well with that slight delay on the line there between Castlecomer and the studio. Miriam, thanks for your time this morning. In a few moments, we'll be hearing from Mary Ammond O'Brien, who's a choir conductor. We'll be talking about an event they're getting ready for, taking place in the Visual in Carlow this Thursday evening. All that on the way, live on the KCLR Daily from Castlecomer.
The KCLR Daily with Brian Redmond. On air, online and on smart speaker. With thanks to Fairgreen Shopping Centre Carlow, helping you step out of the sweatpants and into style. See fairgreen.ie.